Hey, good evening everybody. Tonight I'm going to show you how to make basic stovetop chili. I was deciding what to call this and I wound up with this because I'm using ground beef. I know purists will say you have to use whole chunks, and in one way I do agree with them, but sometimes you just have to make dinner. And this is for people that don't have a lot of experience cooking, and it's about as simple as you can get for this. So you need a few ingredients. Here they are. First step is to start frying your ground beef in a very large frying pan. I use a 5-quart Dutch oven. This does make a lot of chili, provided the ground beef is fresh. Yes, you can freeze this after, and it will keep in the fridge for several days. You don't need any oil for the pan for this. Break this into chunks with your spatula and cook it uncovered, because you want the fat to come out. You don't actually want to steam it, which is what will happen if you put a lid on it. So after you've got that spread out evenly, go start chopping your onions. While the onions are chopped up, I gave the ground beef a stir. It's about halfway done. The next thing to do is drain and rinse your kidney beans. I always rinse my kidney beans. These ones do not have EDTA in them, which is a nice change. They do, however, as you can see, come out rather slimy. Let's zoom in a bit. You can see the goo down there. And when you put some cold water on them, they do have a tendency to froth up. Now, if you do get ones that are preserved with EDTA, definitely rinse those really well, and those will froth. You can kind of feel when the slimy texture is gone if you get your hands in there, so that's good. Sounds like all the water's fried off. So I'm going to get a clean bowl and just scoop out the cooked stuff and keep that to the side for the time being. We'll see how much grease is left in the bottom. So some went in the ground beef. There's a bit left in the bottom of the pan, not as much as I thought, which is encouraging. So now I'll turn the heat back on and throw in the onions. When I have a choice, and I did today, between kidney beans with or without salt, I always pick the no salt version because I want to control how much salt I put in my dishes. And they had no salt at all, so I will add about a teaspoon right now. You can get out a measuring spoon if you like. This is about a teaspoon, and just sprinkle that over. Salt helps water come out of onions faster, aside from adding flavor to the dish. It's not necessary to cook the onions all the way down. What you do want to do is cook them down far enough that they begin to soften and become somewhat translucent. At that point, you add your 1/4 cup of chili powder. This may seem like a lot, but it's actually not, given the amount of food you're making. And if you like things hotter, feel free to put more. I find you get a nice mellow flavor with this. And you always do want to cook down chili powder before you set it to simmer, because if you don't, you'll find that your dish will have a very, lack of a better word, raw flavor to it. Cooked spices always taste much better. We're getting to the simmering stage soon, so to make sure your spices don't burn, I would recommend you turn this down to low right now. Add the can of tomato paste. Give that a brief stir. Add the diced tomatoes with the juice. Then add back your ground beef. Stirring gently because the pan's going to get pretty full at this point. If you don't have a 5-quart Dutch oven and you do have a slow cooker or crock pot that will hold 5 quarts, by all means make it in that. The cooking temperature will depend on how long you want to cook it for when you need it. I prefer a long simmer to a fast cook, but you have to remember that all this at this point, except for the kidney beans, is pretty much cooked, and they are nearly too. So I will want to simmer this for at least an hour. I know this appears really dry right now, and you may be tempted to add liquid. Don't, because there is a lot of water trapped in the onions and the tomatoes, which will come out, as you'll see when I come back in a half an hour. One thing I did forget to mention is that unless you plan to cook this for a couple hours, you should raise your heat to medium now and put a lid on it. It's been cooking for half an hour on medium. And you can see all the water that's come out of the vegetables so far. It's a 1 hour mark now. And the tomatoes have softened up quite a bit. I'm definitely going to turn it right down to low now. This is where you have to look at the texture of your chili. So how much liquid is coming off? You can see by pressing down here, let me zoom, how much liquid is coming off. You can see by pressing down with your spatula. And see how much comes off. And you can also see how thick it is. Now that is a little runny right now, and there's not that much water left in here. So if you do want to thicken it up, I'm going to show you a trick now. The thickening of any chili comes from the starch in the kidney beans, or whatever kind of beans you're putting in. So one way to accelerate the process is pick some of the beans out. Then what you do is get the back of a spoon and mash the beans. This is also a really good test to see how cooked your chili is, because if the beans are really hard to mash, it's not that cooked, and if they go flat right away, you're pretty much set to eat. So after you've mashed up that as much as you're going to get, you can see that's really pasty. And scrape that back. And if you want it even thicker, scrape out a few more beans, do it again, and then you can also top it up with a little bit of water to give it a really nice texture. Because after all the water has come out of the onions and the tomatoes, even at low, it will keep drying out. And you do have to keep some liquid in there to make sure that it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan and burn. I want to set a bit of water. This glass is about 1 cup, and I'm going to add about half of it so you can see how the addition of just that small amount of liquid changes the consistency of the chili. I will pour the rest of it in, because this is going to cook for a bit more. Probably let it go for about 20 minutes or so. If you are pressed for time, you can cook this at a higher heat right from the get-go, but if you're going to do that, you've got to stay with it all the time, stirring every 5 minutes or so, or it's going to burn on you. Personally, I prefer the slower approach. And just pick a quiet day to make this, and you can keep it in the fridge. It freezes if the meat is fresh. It reheats in the microwave like a dream, or in a pot on the stove. It's been another 20 minutes. And you can see that extra liquid I added is working quite nicely in here. Chili is a very personal preference for consistency. So feel free to let it go longer if you want, or add more liquid, or boil it down, whatever you want. I'll just taste that. Kidney beans are cooked right through. I will put a bit in a bowl so you can get a nice close look at it. So that's how I make a basic stovetop chili with ground beef and a few simple ingredients. It's easy to make and it tastes great. So I do hope you try this, and I hope to see you again. Thanks. Bye-bye.